little double stops. Probably everything except maybe harmonics in that tune. So there's some, you know, it's interesting. As I was playing, I was thinking about when we wrote the tune, about especially like that little midsection in there. Because some of that, of course, I'm following along with the guitars because it's pretty ferocious, pretty fast-paced. It makes most sense to play along and double the line, you know. Right, do that kind of thing. And then there's other times when, of course, you know, the bass by nature doesn't necessarily have to follow what, especially in rock and roll music, follow the chord, you know, the exact chord, or in metal certainly follow the riff. And I was thinking, you know, lots of times as a bass player, we can really change the dynamics of the composition. So I try to approach, one of the things when I met Dave Mustaine years back when we formed Megadeth, you know, it really gave me an opportunity not only to step out and, you know, be a chopsmeister, you know, but more importantly, to think like a songwriter and to really compose, you know, because we all want to stand up and, you know, as you walk around the floor, everyone's throwing down their best licks, you know, so that we all sound cool to our buddies, you know. But the truth of it is, most of those licks never will get, you walk into a studio with a producer and he'll say, yeah, but can you play a quarter note? You know, right? You walk on the stage and you do all that kind of stuff and people are like, yeah, whatever, you know. I mean, let's face it, most people like to hear a good tune, a good song, you know, and that's where I come from our rock and roll background, is writing, is having good songs. I'm a fan of good songs. I love when a good song is composed, and, you know, writing a good song, sometimes a simple song, is a lot harder than it sounds, and that's the art and the magic of it. So, you know, that thing in the middle, like even just that halftime thing, so I'm sort of picking up some accents and some of the parts of the riff, but often I'm just kind of sitting back, hitting some whole notes, you know, just kind of laying out, letting the guitar, and most importantly, letting the melody of the vocal carry it, getting out of the way. And I find it in metal music especially, really all rock and roll, but, you know, the session stuff that I do and records that I've made over the years, I love it. You know, the building blocks of most rock and roll and definitely metal music are definitely the rhythm guitar, which is the riff, and drums. They're really the building block. And you'd think, well, bass is a foundation instrument. It's like, yeah, it's a foundation instrument, but I look at it more like it's, you've got the two blocks and then you pour the bass, we're the mortar in between, and we kind of glue everything together. And that's what solidifies it. In fact, when I'm recording, you know, the last bunch of years that I've been making records, I always like to record, get the guitar down, get the drums down. I mean, I keep a real guitar, and then come in and put bass over top of it, because I'll know where I can play, where I shouldn't. It also helps me develop a better tone, because I know how big the guitars are going to get and how big the drums are going to get. And then also, if you can even have a scratch vocal, it helps really get out of the way of the vocal, of knowing where the vocal is, you know. So, and I've always been joking with Mark here from Harkey that, you know, it's funny that in rock and especially in metal music, there's such a, you know, especially in Megadeth, because we use Marshall amplification, which is real heavy in the mid-range, as opposed to some of the newer amplifiers, the Mesa stuff, even the PD 5150s, 65.5, that kind of stuff, has that real kind of scooped out, the new metal thing has this real scooped out mid thing. Well, back in our day, heavy mids on the guitars, you know, so I had to kind of scoop my bass around it. I had a lot of bottom, and as you can hear, there's a lot of top, and as a result of that, there's a lot of scoop out of there. So I'd be interested to hear today, because I always thought, you know, me and Victor Wooten probably have the exact same tone settings on our amp. So you can play like, you know, what he does in thrash metal through the same amp, which is ironic that the tone dynamics would be like that, because there's so much mid-range in the guitar. Anyway, all these things that I think about as I'm composing. Anybody ever sat down and recorded themselves, or went in the studio and recorded? What's the first thing you find out when you record yourself? You suck, right? You're not as good as you thought you were. So one of the things that, even as I was just playing this last tune, a lot of these Megadeth songs, which are ripping and we're thrashing and we're headbanging and, you know, we're all in this furious moment, you know. Truth of it is internally, I'm actually feeling halftime on most of it, you know. So even on that, you know, I'm gonna, and what that does is it actually helps me pull back and just kind of fall back into where the swing of the snare drum is. And as opposed to being up on the top, which I used to do years ago, you know, when I was, you know, much younger, I was just kind of down. studio, you know, the producer would always say, man, lay it back a little bit, man, lay it back. And I always had a hard time laying it back until I developed this thing, and my buddy Al Petrelli, who played in Megadeth with me about 10 years ago, does the Trans-Siberian Orchestra now. He was real big on that, especially with vocal stuff, like counting in halftime. And we'd sit and we'd watch VH1 things, and he'd always go, man, look, check out that singer, man, they're totally feeling it in halftime. And I realized that vocalists oftentimes in their recording feel things in halftime. Because, you know, when you're ahead of the beat or you're sharp, it's annoying. It's that cat scratching the chalkboard aggravation, right? But when you play, not that you ever want to play flat or sing flat, but it's better to scoop up into a note as a singer. But as a bass player, to get it either right on the kick drum or right behind it, kick or the snare. And now with today's modern recording, even with GarageBand, you know, things like that, I mean, you can see the waveform. You can see the drum hits, bang, there it is, right? So as you're recording, check out trying to place your note either right on that or even just a scotch behind it. And all of a sudden, man, you'll start to feel like it doesn't change so much exactly what you're playing, it changes the feel of it. And that's that infamous word that we throw around, especially bass players, we throw around this word groove. You know, what is groove? Well, groove is how it feels, right? And that's really the mechanics of how the groove is. You're either ahead of the beat, you're on the beat, or you're behind the beat. And those little nuances are going to, and also the time, the space between the notes that you play. That's really what the essence of groove is. So dial up that, it says priest. It's kind of just a straight groove here, kind of a typical metal thing. And I'm going to try to, as I'm playing it, even try to visually emulate with my body because I can't do it because I'm playing here, but just to kind of show where I'm feeling on the eighth note versus where I'm feeling on the halftime. So go ahead and pop that down. Internally, again, playing the same thing, just right? Notes haven't changed. What I'm physically playing hasn't changed. But what's changed is internally where I'm feeling it. And I find one of the things that really helps with that, we all practice with our metronomes, right? It's Sunday, so we shouldn't lie, but we'll lie on that one, right? I find that, you know, of course, a metronome is, it's kind of boring, isn't it? You know, but as good as that discipline is, sometimes just getting a drum machine out. Simple drum machine, you can just kind of do, that's actually a real drummer playing on that, but even just a simple groove like that, I'd find drum machines and I'd dial up the metal or the rock groove, and it's kind of got that big, you know, Metallica, Enter Sandman groove kind of thing, you know, and it's just kind of a fun thing to play along with, because you can listen to the snare, you can listen to the hi-hat, you can listen to the kick, and as you're practicing, I find that that's really kind of a cool thing, because again, if you're listening to the hat, you're going to be up on probably the eighth note. Right? And if you get it back to the kick, you're going to be listening to usually the downbeat. And if you're listening to the snare, all of a sudden you're kind of listening to that. God, you're kind of listening to where the swing of the snare is. And I find a lot of my favorite drummers that I played with, and man, that's really where their pocket is finding where the swing of that snare is. And it's like, man, sometimes that can really just help a groove get really nice and fat. And it's not the drummer's responsibility to be the only guy in the band with good time, by the way. I played with a lot of drummers, and I was happy I did my disciplines of working with my metronome and my drum machine and stuff, because when I got in the studio and I played with them or even live, all of a sudden I realized, whoa, this is either like this guy's dragging or he's a runaway train, and being able to just kind of help anchor things. It's the bass player's job as well, you know, to be able to do that. So, let me see that iPod real quick. Got a couple of things on here.